This is the Speak USA podcast. I'm Cliff Zentgraf, your host. Let's learn about our democracy and the action that we can all take to make it stronger. Chase Taylor, welcome to the Speak USA podcast.
Yes, sir. Happy to be here.
Yeah, this is awesome. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, especially part one, where we're going to replay what we were talking about just a minute ago.
Yes, sir.
You're a Mavs fan, and you were upset by the Luka Doncic.
I was a diehard Mavs fan.
Doncic. Help me out there.
Yeah, Luka Doncic. I mean, I named my dog after him. My dog's name is Luka.
That is painful.
So me and my brother grew up. We lived in Arlington for about 3 years, and while we were there, we saw the 2011 championship, and ever since then, we were Mavs fans. And the Mavericks always had this culture of, we get a guy, we build around him, we win with that guy, because that one championship with Dirk was worth 7 anywhere else, because we watched him earn it, and we thought that was him. And now he's a Laker.
I'll have to beg to differ with you. So our conversation when he walked in, he hadn't noticed the poster right behind me that talks about the San Antonio Spurs. Mm-hmm. And you said about the Spurs.
Well, I don't dislike them. I'm not against them.
And I said,
I don't remember.
You can stay.
Oh, I can stay. That's right.
Exactly. So, but anyway, we have fun with sports, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes,
there's a lot more serious things to talk about. So we're going to do that. Chase, you are in a program called Global Ties US. You're an emerging leader in the Emerging Leader program. You're going to UTSA,
yes, sir.
International Studies, and you are running for State Representative 125.
Yes, sir.
This is also awesome to talk about. We're going to start with what you are doing in the Global Ties US program as an emerging leader in the Emerging Leader program. Tell us about that.
So Global Ties is actually a network that kind of forms together in correspondence with the State Department. Specifically, I was with San Antonio Council for International Visitors, interned with them for a little while, and I was their sponsor for the Emerging Leader program. And my program was Art of Diplomacy, which in essence is just you get kids, youth groups, some young adult groups in coordination with each other from countries like Ukraine, Poland, Mexico, United States, Canada, to name a few. And they upload all of their art into our database, and it can be shared with one another. So the goal is to foster, obviously, greater empathy, communication, but you're trying to lay the groundwork for citizen diplomacy, which is the Global Ties whole initiative, at a very early age.
And we talked beforehand about soft power, mm-hmm. right? And you had some interesting comments about how doing this with students, please.
Well, with students, but in general, so IVLP, the International Visitor Leadership Program, was initially founded, if I'm not mistaken, under the Truman era. And the basic idea was you bring people from other countries into the United States. They learn from us, whether it's social issues, or they go to a power plant, or they're sponsored, right? There's different areas that can be in. They form connections with people in those areas. They take what they learn back to their country, and hopefully those connections remain. And they emulate some part of the American way of doing things. And that slowly builds soft power, where you don't have to use your military to try to accomplish whatever your goals are abroad. And recently, we have retracted from that way of thinking. The very way that the U.S. built its foreign power and influence for the entire 20th century has been abandoned, and China has pretty much taken our place in terms of citizen diplomacy.
Yeah, that makes me very sad. In my own career, again, you and I talked beforehand. It took me much longer in my life than you, but I did eventually do a lot of international travel. When you get to know someone, it's harder to think poorly of them. When I see things happening in the world now, I can picture the places that we're talking about. When our allies are criticized in some way, I think about the people that I know in those places, and I'm like, what are we doing? Basically, hey, you did something that is cool, but it's deep, and I really respect what you did. You went to Ukraine.
Yes, sir.
I want to know more about that. I want our audience to hear more about that.
Yes, sir. Well, I went to Ukraine in March of 24, I believe. It might have been 23. I think it was 24. And it was part of a humanitarian aid convoy. We took ambulances and extraction vehicles to Lviv, right in the western portion.
And who's we?
It was sponsored by Rotary Club, but there were only 2 Americans there. It was me and my mentor, J.C. Clapsaddle. We were the only 2 Americans. Everyone else was English, literally the whole crowd. And we took humanitarian aid equipment, baby powder, clothes, and other things that civilians would need, especially closer to the Eastern Front. And the ambulances and the extraction vehicles were both sent to the front lines. And in all likelihood, they probably only lasted a week, especially the extraction vehicles. I mean, they are running through those in Ukraine. That's actually pretty much the number one thing they're always asking for. It's not planes or even artillery. They need extraction vehicles.
And an extraction vehicle, what is?
It's I think like a Toyota Tacoma armored up, and basically it's used for if there's a guy who is injured, or if you have a rotating shift of guys on the front line who are trying to take their leave for a week, you send an extraction vehicle to grab them and go back. But the Russians specifically target extraction vehicles and specifically target ambulances. One of the reasons we took ambulances from the UK is a lot of Ukrainians on the ground requested them because the driver's on the other side of the vehicle. And Russians, whenever the ambulances are driving down the road, will purposely shoot at the driver, and it'll buy that driver a half-second extra time to react. So, yeah, it was a pretty interesting experience. Don't know if I ever need to go again, but it was enlightening on, I think, a lot of the problems we're facing here at home. So,
in what way?
well, so a little story. Whenever we were in Lviv, there was a guy in a golf cart, and he was offering tours of, these like old cathedrals and whatnot. And it was super cheap, partly because you're in Ukraine, and also because no one's going on tours. So we were like, all right, we'll go. And he's taking us to them. And, it's just a weird vibe. You don't necessarily want to be there. You'll go into one, it's empty. There's a woman crying in the corner. It's not like a very joyous time. And we go church to church. And then finally we get to one near the main square. And I walk in and I realize it's only women and children in this entire thing. And I immediately am like, I'm okay. I don't need to be here. We can head out for now. And as I'm walking out, there's even more, maybe 24 more women and children walking in. So we hold the door open for them and they go, and we're all trying to figure out what's going on. And we look, and there's just 12 vehicles lined up, mostly trucks, and they're just bringing out bodies one at a time with the Ukrainian flag over them, and they're just bringing them into the church, and they're having a mass funeral for soldiers and possibly civilians, but I think it was mostly soldiers. And as we were leaving, someone gets out a trumpet and they play the Ukrainian national anthem, and the whole city just like comes to a stop, and everyone waits until it's done. And you realize that these people are literally fighting for democracy. They're trying to bring it into fruition in their country, and people are dying for it. Men, women, children, civilians, soldiers, and the whole country is focused on this one goal, which is winning, which is beating back authoritarianism. And because Ukraine is essentially being punished for trying to liberalize, for trying to become a democracy. That's what Russia's goal is.
That's exactly right.
So.
Yeah. So I want to work in a place, my day job, where I hear the national anthem every day. And I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, wow, that's kind of different. As Americans, we don't hear the national anthem played on the TV in other countries, by the way, countries I've been to. I was in the airport and I heard the country's national anthem, or it sure sounded like it. Turned out it was playing, and I was like, well, that's different. We have such little appreciation of what the people who came before us did to earn the thing that we enjoy, and we've completely forgotten, and you've seen it.
Yes, I mean, that's one of my biggest talking points that I try to bring up with people is To me, the United States, the thing that everything we have in our identity, the most important thing to me is this implicit promise that I think every American is born with, right? That you're going to leave this world a little better off than the way you found it. And there's a debt that I feel I owe to all of those that came before me to give me opportunities I never would have had a chance in. And it frustrates me whenever you see people talk about going back to some time before, when all of that work people put in to get us where we are now. I think the last thing they'd want to hear is we want to go back to their time. It's like, what's the point of me doing all this? Why?
Yeah. I have the same feeling. It'd be a little controversial among a certain group of people if I brought this up. But I think about my dad, who was in Third Army in World War II. He fought Nazis. I mean, literally. He wasn't on the front line, but he was doing his part in Germany, other places to fight Germans. And now I'm watching us see, we're not Germany. I don't mean to come across, say that we're in that spot, but I see the practices of what was done in that country happening today in the United States. And it's just sickening to me.
Political apathy people have towards that change. It just doesn't seem to be revolting in the way that you think it should, especially, after visiting Ukraine and coming back. People need to understand democracy isn't something that just exists in perpetuity after you get it.
No.
You need to take care of it. You need to maintain it. You're like a gardener. And if you just let basically the weeds of authoritarianism come in, it's going to strangle everything else around it. There's no existing or coexisting with authoritarianism. It's one or the other. It's very diametrically opposed. So, the apathy is just frustrating because you see people giving way towards basically what is the most un-American concept in my mind, which is taking away power from the people.
Yeah, indeed. And by the way, we're the weed killers.
Yeah, weed killers.
I love it. I'm probably going to be using that analogy for a little bit now. We're the weed killers of the political apathy that has snuck into the things that we do. Well, I'm so thankful that you did that you went to Ukraine, and that's an example for all of us. It's an example to get involved, to try to make a difference, and to think more deeply about the debt that we owe to those who came before. And so what should we do before we leave this topic? One of the things we try to be very careful about is not just complaining about things, but saying, okay, we don't like it like this, but so what would we do instead? So what should we do?
Yeah, it's actually one of the criticisms I think I'll be getting into later. So in terms of what we should do is we should take a much more proactive approach in terms of, first off, how we message, but then in terms of what policies we project. Right now, and I don't know if we're jumping the shark already to domestic, but
whatever.
Right now, the Democrats are very much on the defensive, it feels, of every talking point, every docket. The Republicans basically get to decide what matters in the media sphere. And the reason for that, I think, is right now, Democratic leadership is very much focused on trying to get politics back to what it was pre-2016. They're trying to be almost like a homeostatic kind of force in terms of politics, where I don't think people are appealed to right now. I think there are a lot of problems in our system. I think there's severe wealth inequality. I think there are a lot of people that feel that they aren't getting what they're entitled to, right? They put in the work and they're not getting the same reward. They can't afford a house. People don't want to have kids because they can't figure out how they'll be able to factor that in with their, lively pricing. So Democrats need to find a new direction, because Republicans, their direction is aimless. I think it's incompetent, but just the messaging of it being somewhere different than where it is now. Like, we're on a sinking ship and that one's sinking faster, but at least everyone here thinks that one's different.
Well, I know you think there, and I agree with, well, I don't know that I think the Republicans' approach is aimless. I just think it's horribly misguided at the least, horribly misguided. At the least. And yes, I agree with that last comment you just made. But at the same time, you believe they've got their act together when it comes to media. So we jump the shark. So let's embrace jumping the shark. Okay. Run us through that. How you think about how Republicans are handling the media.
And I guess I'll wrap up what Democrats should talk on right after. But in terms of communication, their communication apparatus is like right in line. I mean, they are walking with each other, from memes on Instagram to TikToks to YouTube videos to then independent news and then finally your mainstream news. Wherever a message is found at some level, it is immediately like linked up and sent to everyone else. One good example I can think of is if you're a young person, if you're Gen Z and you were on the internet during 2016, you know woke. You know what woke is. Woke was used by right-wing people, all through Trump's initial election to make fun of and demean the left, right? The guys and girls that would show up on campus and talk down the Ben Shapiros and Steven Crowders of the world. And that wasn't really in the national vocabulary yet. And I don't think I really heard it until 2020 when one of my family members, who's very right-wing, suddenly called someone woke. And they're like 60 years old. I was like, where did you learn this from? And I saw them watching Fox News, and they'd incorporated that. Woke did not come from Fox News. Woke came from Reddit and 4chan. That's where it originated. And that went up the chain and was turned into a talking point. That does not exist for Democrats. Our media sphere, and it's very much a product of the way that Democrats and liberals and just left-wing thinkers in general operate, because you have groups that are just focused on, the truth, independent journalism, whereas the right wing is about message. They're just trying to win. The Republicans want to win. Democrats want to, deal with objective truth most of the time. And because of that, there's not that same coordination. You don't have CNN's coordinating with independent media.
All right. So I believe in objective truth.
Yes.
I just want to say that. How do we win with objective?
Well,
because I don't want to win without it.
You don't need to lie.
Yeah. Which, oh my gosh, lies. How in the world? Okay, y'all. Everybody knows where I'm headed right now. How in the world can all these lies be thrown on the table and nobody complains about it? I don't get it. But anyway, let hit the escape key. Yeah. go back. How do we do it?
Well, first one, we need to be coordinated right off the bat. Mainstream, independent, down through social media, they need to become more integrated. And that doesn't require becoming less independent or being less truth-seeking. You can still have that. But until there's that coordination on messaging, it's going to be very difficult to respond to their talking points, but super difficult to create our own. Because if there's some talking point that may be super popular with the rest of the American people, but it's caught up in this niche down in some Reddit somewhere, and that's never gone up to CNN or MSNBC or NBC, it's difficult for us to be promoting new messaging.
Yeah, so. I love that too. And something I really try to make a habit of is not to repeat even critiques using the language and the verbiage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't want to, in fact, I'm thinking about one right now, but I don't want to say it because I don't want to build on that. It's the difference between playing defense and playing offense, right? And we need to be on offense. We need to have our own sayings. We need to have our own ideas.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and Democrats used to be really good at this too. That's the thing. Like, under the Obama years, I mean, we were making slogans. We had talking points. We were dictating the terms of political discourse. But ever since Trump, it's just a bad matchup with the current establishment party. The only people that seem to do a decent job in messaging and countering right now seem to be the very progressive left, but they're not really in the same camp as a lot of the establishment kind of Democrats. And I'm not saying it's bad to be an establishment Democrat. It's just because they aren't hooked up to that same kind of media ecosystem that they're allowed to develop a much more independent kind of messaging and policy choices, your AOCs and whatnot. And I think they need to take a page from that book. And if you could just link those up, I mean, you'll be able to, at the very least, react as in unison as a party better to conservative talking points.
You're going to change your area of study to a radio, TV, and film?
I have 2 semesters left of political science. So
no, okay. Well, I think you're making the right call then. So, but that's fascinating. You make me wish I understood more about how those systems.
Well, I understand more so.
Systems work. Yeah.
I understand more so the kind of ground level social media, YouTube, like live stream aspect, because that's where people my age operate. I mean, most people my age get their political content off of social media, off of internet debates, right? They don't watch mainstream news. But if you go to conservative media, people my age still engage with the same things, TikTok, right, that a Democrat would. But that same messaging they're getting is basically whatever Fox News has, or vice versa, and it's just being curtailed for their specific demographic. Charlie Kirk, right? There's no version of him on the left. It doesn't exist. That guy's lock and step with the Trump administration. He meets with him, I think, every month. And he's supposed to be the young, hip, kind of college-oriented conservative guy. But they're still very much in coordination. You can see that pipeline is still there.
To the extent of being government propaganda,
essentially, yeah. Or at least party propaganda. But
you would have been a very, very, very young man the first time I noticed. I mean, I've never been a Fox News watcher. I was once upon a time not the opponent that I am today. But I remember the first time I saw the old slogan for Fox News: fair and balanced. And I'm listening to what they're saying, and I'm thinking to myself, this is not fair and balanced. This is a lie. It's a lie. You know, it's framing, but you know, it's framing, but it's very intentional framing to try to convince people that they're saying things, the things they're saying are true, when they were not true. And you know, there are moments where I think that all of our problems go right back to that. You know, that you hear a lot of people say that our current president is, you know, not really the cause of the problem, but the symptom of the problem. And I can see that. I you know, I don't know how I feel about it, but I can see that argument, right? Because I remember where I was sitting on the couch seeing that slogan and think, no, that's not right.
No, yeah. I think that Trump is, I don't necessarily agree with that, because I truly do see him as this just almost Mao Zedong, Stalin kind of force of just as a personality, where I do not believe the MAGA movement survives when he is gone. I don't think it does. Something else may take its place. They will try to keep it running, but there is not a single person in that party who can replicate what he does. He is so disconnected from reality and fact, just as a person. He doesn't have to act like he doesn't understand the facts. He literally does not understand anything. He's incompetent in policy, rejects reality. I mean, this is the same guy that, because he rejects numbers, ran how many businesses into the ground? So when you have someone who just acts like nothing phases them because nothing truly phases them, people are easier to be bought into that.
It's authentic.
It's authentic. I mean, he is authentically...
It's a horrible kind of authentic, but it's authentic.
Incompetent. You know, J.D. Vance isn't that. J.D. Vance is, I think, fairly obviously kind of grifting towards whatever he thinks could get him more power. And a lot of other people in the Republican Party are the same way. They can't replicate that same disconnection from reality that Trump can. It's something that you just have or you don't.
I sure hope you're right about that.
I hope so too. Now, the only question is, does the Republican Party gain so much in the meantime that whatever comes next can just coast off of the gains of the Trump administration?
You know, whenever somebody gets a significant illness, there's kind of this rule of thumb that it takes for every day that you're sick, it takes 3 or 4 days to get back to normal. And I fear that's where we're at right now. I mean, the things we're tearing down. Here's by the way, my complaint of the day. Robert Kennedy has, I don't know if he has the right to do this. I guess we're going to find out. But he's canceled funding for mRNA vaccines. What in the world? He may owe his life. I mean, we don't know which ones of us survived COVID as a result of that, right? We'll never, know who wouldn't have survived without them, but he might owe his life to them. They are transformational. This is not hard. And yet we're stopping funding for research for those. It's insane.
And two things. One, I saw an article, I think it was The Atlantic, where it was talking about how the U.S. is having its Ming Dynasty moment. Where, it's just tearing itself apart for no reason and becoming this isolationist kind of hermit that rejects outside ideas. But in kind of along those lines, to get back to what I was saying earlier about the sinking ship, I think that there needs to be a change in the nation as a whole. I mean, the Democratic Party, to me, has become too reliant and interconnected with corporate interests, with lobby interests, to really and effectively be a alternative to Republicans. And this isn't me saying that we have to go like super far left. I would like us to kind of return to the bones of the party, being about working issues, working families, labor relations, because most of the things that I think are causing people to lash out right now and choose a Trump are things that originally Democrats used to own, right? Housing prices could be solved very likely if you would eliminate restrictive zoning laws. Our wages haven't kept up with inflation, mostly because we have weakened labor unions and labor in general in this country so much since, I mean, you can say the 60s, but especially since the 80s, ever since Reagan, it's just been, constantly reduced. And then Democrats have yet to rectify that initial descaling that basically Reagan did. They just do like little incremental changes up, but generally it's been a downward slope.
There were some good things that happened during Obama.
Well, actually, I would say Biden did a lot, more than him, especially with the, what was it? I cannot remember the name of the bill right now, which is so unfortunate. But it was as like if an employer found you were trying to make a union and try to bust, immediate unionship was granted.
Indeed, I agree.
And but we need to go so much. I mean, if we could rectify, I think a lot of the things I think Reagan's where we are right now truly starts. I think Reagan was the guy that put everything in play. We just have too much wealth floating on the top. It's just not distributed enough. And until people feel that the work they're putting in is giving them their share of, the nation's wealth, the largest economy in human history, you're going to see them lash out. And they're going to pick whatever the alternative is because they're not being given one on the other side. People view the Democrats as status quo, Republicans as change. Even if that's not true or their change is worse, and I think Democrats get a bad rap, but I do think there are some things that we have done a decent job.
Well, you're talking about perceptions.
Perceptions.
Right.
But in politics, perception is literally all that matters because the true swing voter is not the person who's linked up to politics every single day. And this is probably my hottest take. The last person you should be talking to on a campaign and in your messaging is the person who reads, news every day, is on NBC, MSNBC, reading reports, seeing, what Pew Research puts out. That person very likely is going to find evident truth and get to correct positions on their own. You're talking to the guy who listens to Joe Rogan, that thinks politics doesn't matter or voting doesn't matter because they've already decided. That's the person that decides elections in the country right now. That's the swing voter. That or a person who's just never thought about politics and hasn't turned out. So Democrats need to both offer a different direction for the country and at the same time try to figure out how to invigorate people that haven't voted before, youth voters, and some people who are maybe in that middle ground, like union voters, which Trump has made a large gain in. Obama's coalition in 2008 was very much that. People thought it was a different direction for the country, got a lot of youth. I mean, he had, I think, literally the highest first-time voter numbers, definitely in the 21st century, but I think it was for like 50 years. He turned people out to vote that hadn't voted before. So,
wow. Let's go fix it. You make me want to go run out the front door. Let's go. So, the next question up, and I wonder if we jump the shark as well, but I bet you got some more stuff to say about it. So you're running for state representative.
Yes, sir.
Explain why you've chosen to run. Explain what your focus would be. That's where maybe we jump the shark. Hey, you can say it again. It doesn't matter. Explain, what is motivating you to do this?
Well, I'd always wanted to be involved in politics in some way. I didn't know when in my life that would be. But after the Harris loss to Trump, I just was so disappointed and angry. I just thought, why not just throw my hat in and see what I can do? But on top of that, once I looked at the polling that came out after of young people in general, but young men, I realized this is a problem. We cannot lose the youth vote. We cannot lose the young male vote. I mean, it's essential towards Democrats winning elections in the future that we keep the youth vote in our camp.
In our Speak USA group, we talk about that a lot, actually. What's going on there?
It's messaging. It's literally messaging. What I just said is, if you took me like 8 years ago, I probably would be giving you because I grew up in a pretty conservative household, I would be giving you the Trump like speech as a 16-year-old kid. And it's this idea that, people are coming out of college, they're coming out of high school, they have their girlfriends, they have wives, or vice versa, boyfriends, husbands, and they're thinking about settling down, maybe doing family. But it just costs too much. It's prohibitive. Housing is prohibitive. Cost of living is prohibitive. Having a kid is prohibitive. Anything you want to do is so expensive that they don't understand why it's not working for them. Because we all grew up with this promise: if you go get your degree, you're going to be fine. You'll have a high-paying job. And that is true in the long term. Within 40 years, you are going to make more than someone without a college degree, and you may have debt, but it'll probably work out. But when you contrast that with parents or grandparents who are like,
not many people vote based on how they're going to be doing 40 years from now.
That's probably the worst policy platform to be on. Here in 40 years, you'll be doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, but we shouldn't lose sight of it.
Yeah, and
right.
Part of that is a housing issue, which can be fixed, in my opinion, on a very local level. And I think you're kind of seeing people move that direction. We had
housing is a huge deal.
Austin
locally.
Love Austin. Their zoning laws, I wish everyone would just emulate. And I was just in Japan, and one of the things you notice there is I was looking at their housing prices. You can get a house in Japan for $70,000, and partially that's the declining population. Partially is that's a currency difference. But the biggest part is Japan overbuilt housing on purpose. It was a policy choice. So at the end of the day, you would always have affordable housing, because housing should not be something that's cost prohibitive, not just from a livelihood perspective, from an economic perspective. You don't want too much of a population's income kept up in housing, because that's money that isn't being used to stimulate the economy.
I think what is it, 30%? I think somewhere right around there is the number beyond.
And it keeps increasing.
Yeah, beyond 30% is a number beyond which you're in economic trouble.
Yes.
If that's what you're having to do, right? And then you're correct, that number keeps going up. Our prior mayor of San Antonio, this is a huge issue to him. Our new mayor, this is an issue to her. I've heard her talk about
I hope so.
as well. It's something that I do in my normal job. We had students look at challenges of our city. And every year we ask our finalists, what do you want to work on next year? And so the 2024 finalists said, we want to work on housing and homelessness.
And that's another,
that was their choice.
That's another one of the big policy changes I will be advocating for, and using the bully pulpit to advocate for, is property taxes. Property taxes, because we're already seeing in Texas property values are increasing, and property tax is incentivizing people to have as expensive a property as possible and to end up pawning off on someone later else, right? And it's not even getting into the overall issues with schooling and property tax, and how in the end of the day that ends up affecting people that are less fortunate. Texas has a very regressive tax structure, but having this kind of incentivization in tax code, in just general, people hold their wealth in housing, which is also we just talked about one of the least effectual ways to build wealth long term. It's one of the safer ways if you're paying your mortgage, but there are better ways to make sure that you have longer lasting or wealth that keeps increasing later in life. And whenever you have people that get older, they don't want to give up that house because that's the anchor of their economic stability, right?
Right.
And there's no way for them to move somewhere else and keep that. So they just hold on to it. They say, well, no, I've earned this, we'll keep it. And people aren't moving out of those multifamily homes when they get older for younger families to move into and to keep growing. So and I think this is also a big reason why you're seeing these declining birth rates around the world, because housing is becoming a bigger issue around the world. And there's other factors involved in that as well, but especially Western nations, the US, Canada, England, these places where housing becomes cost prohibitive, you have a lot of problems when it comes to not just child having kids, but lashing out, and specifically lashing out from young men. That's why I think you're seeing a lot of this far right kind of rhetoric ripping up. It's where you're seeing cost of living and cost of housing being high, right? Because if there's one group, if there's one demographic in a country that you never want to be riled up, it's young men. I mean, it typically doesn't end well for countries whenever that's the group that's having the most, issues with the status quo. So need to address it.
Yeah, we need to fix it. So back to the question I asked. You're running State Rep 125.
Yes.
So obviously housing is an issue that's on your mind. Are there other issues?
Charter schools, public schools. I was just watching a NBC clip on the way here, listening to it on the way here, and they were talking about test scores and why people were divided on it. And my position is very simple. Charter schools rarely outcompete public schools in rural areas, rarely outcompete them in suburban areas. The only areas where you see charter schools be effective is typically in urban areas, but there are caveats to that. Typically, charter schools have a lower student body. They're able to have increased funding compared to those other schools in the area, and funding does not mean everything for schools, right? Eventually, there's a cap where funding gives diminishing returns. But for a lot of these schools in inner cities and urban areas, funding is the biggest issue, partly because of property taxes in Texas. And whenever you have a school where they have a smaller student body, more cost per student, you're going to naturally see higher reading and math scores. Now, one way you could fix that is by possibly increasing funding to those schools in inner cities, but that doesn't seem to be the Republican Party's agenda here. It's to keep siphoning money away from public schools because, let's just say it, they hate public schools. The Republican Party, I feel, has become much more mask off about their opinion of public schools. And I feel that Republicans would love nothing more than a truly privatized schooling system.
Yeah,
and charter schools are just one step removed.
I'll tell you, I feel the shoe dropped when the governor got his vouchers after years of promising, while holding public school funding hostage in order to get vouchers. Years of promising, implying, whatever word you want to use, that if you give me vouchers, you'll get your money. And then he got vouchers and a bone got thrown to the schools. And the schools are struggling. They're having to cut budgets. Class sizes are getting larger. And there's no help on the way.
Well, I feel in a way they're trying to manufacture a crisis so that they can truly get to their ultimate agenda of privatized schooling.
Yeah. Look how they're not working. Never mind that they're the reasons it's not working.
That's why you'll likely never see Republicans give an inch on the property tax issue, because that's so central towards ensuring that there is this inequality in the schooling system, because they want there to be an inequality in the schooling system. And the only silver lining right now is, in order for Abbott to have passed that voucher program, he had to piss off a lot of rural Republicans. If you were following that process, there were a lot of rural Republicans historically will have sided with Democrats to stop that kind of bill from passing. And he just got enough, but they were not happy. There were still a sizable number of rural Republicans in Texas who were not a fan of the voucher program. And my hope is there's some sort of tentative alliance, maybe after Trump, that can be made specifically on schooling issues with those rural Republicans.
To bring it back.
To bring it back, but I think it might be an end to a broader coalition in terms of Texas politics, and it can't exist with Trump.
Yeah, boy, you make me hopeful. But then I think about immigration. There was bipartisan agreement on immigration.
Yes.
Not at the state level, but at the national level, that he stuck his nose in, and then then it wasn't signed.
Yes.
And yeah, so I hope you're right. This is another case where I think I'm going to say, sure, hope you're right.
Well, that's the goal of the campaign, is hope a little bit.
Well, boy, I love that.
And even about the immigration, this is something I talked with you the other night about, was Democrat, and this goes in hand with the communication through social media, is Democrats need to also, if there's one thing, I hate always saying learn from Republicans, mimic Republicans, because I want us to build our own thing. One of the few things from Republicans that I honestly kind of admire is that they earn their talking points and they will stick with them. They will hold a losing talking point for 50 years and it'll keep their base engaged, but they keep messaging those I mean, these are the guys that were, anti-choice forever, and they won. They won with it, granted through the Supreme Court, but they won with it, and their base has been totally lit ablaze by it. And because they kept that messaging up and were so persistent, I think there was apathy. I mean, because everyone thought that the woman vote was just going to absolutely skyrocket because of the anti-choice laws. And that didn't happen. That wasn't there. And I think part of the reason why was general voter apathy, but because they were so persistent in that messaging, that the idea became less and less radical in the general public. So with immigration, sure, stronger border, but just like Obama, that needs to be paired with immigration reform. Those two need to be paired at the hip. If you ever say stronger border, immigration reform better be the next words out of your mouth, right? And we need to keep that, because even if that's unpopular now, give it 20 years, 40, and we can talk long term.
Well, it's cause for hope. By the way, everybody, excuse me while I make sure that little beep. There we go. While I make sure that little beep doesn't happen again. That was my computer. Sorry. Sorry, everybody. You give me hope that if we'll stick to our talking points, that it will turn. I think of Obama, the arc of justice. Mm-hmm. We'll come back. I didn't say it the way he says it.
Well, it's hard to say it like he says it. I mean, the guy is probably the best communicator as a president since Reagan. Not even probably, he is the best communicator as president since Reagan. So, it's important that I've noticed too, in my opinion, that it seems as though Democrats will abandon talking points the moment they become not even super unpopular. If it just doesn't pull well a little bit within a short amount of time, they just won't bring it up, right? And I think that's another reason you're seeing this very reactive kind of politics from the Democratic Party, because they don't have very many talking points they'll own. There's a few. Pro-choice was probably one of them, but they didn't really message that as for the Republicans have been, abortion is murder for 40 years. And Democrats, we pretty much only bring that up when a Republican brings it up. So they've been very much on the offensive on that talking point.
Well, it's back to that issue of playing defense versus playing offense, right? And it lines up with something that I believe very deeply. I have spent a lot of time on social media making my opinion heard. It's not something I did before 2016. I mean, I never talked about politics. You talked about how you've changed. Interestingly, probably in a similar time frame, if not a similar age. I think I've changed as well. And there is, to me, a fundamental value, an intrinsic value in standing our ground on the messaging, on the things that we value, on the things that are important to us. Even if we're screaming into the wind, with nobody down at the bottom of the mountain, we need to be doing that. We need to be standing our ground on this messaging, because eventually somebody's going to hear it.
Well, not just standing ground.
People are going to hear it.
Taking ground. Going on the offensive. That's part of the reason I launched my campaign, is I put on my campaign being very attack-oriented. The moment I meet up with a Republican, I do not intend on being very cordial or not. I'm not looking to collaborate or concede or find common ground, because right now under Trump, the Republican, there's nothing for me to find common ground on.
That's right.
And I understand a lot of people, for a politician, there might be a lot of people that don't like to hear that. But Republicans say it. Republicans say it to their base all the time. Trump talks about how we're un-American, how we don't, in his speeches. And I don't understand why we have to keep on trying to build bridges with people that don't want to build them with us, because there's no common ground on should the president have a presidential immunity. they say, well, yeah, I mean, he's the president, and whatever Trump likes, I like, and I'll always support. That's not compatible.
Right.
How do you find a middle ground there? Only one of those positions get to win, right? And I think a lot of moderate Democrats and moderate independents, and I say that because I don't really believe there are that many moderate independents left, truly. I think everyone's kind of picked their side at this current point because they're so opposed.
Which is a downstream impact of the tone that has been set.
Tone, yes, sir.
Which is sad to me. I hope a day comes back when the center majority can be in charge of politics in our nation again, but this is not that time.
And also because people talk as though this hasn't happened before, how this kind of diametrically first off, we've had a civil war.
Yeah. Secondly, not in our lifetime.
Not in our
perhaps,
lifetime.
Right.
But I mean, if you go back and look at the Hoover FDR time, if you just read the reports that came out then, I mean, people couldn't stand FDR. And he came in and won nearly every state. And literally won the elections. I think he won everything but one. So he's kind of someone I emulate in terms of messaging. And I think that there's actually a lot of overlap. Not, they always say what history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. Is that kind of era, end of Great Depression or beginning of Great Depression, transition FDR. I think there's some similarities there in how the Democratic Party should emulate its messaging and its policies. That was tail end of Gilded Age. You had super wealthy people and those that had nothing, and those wealthy people who kept, stating how important and intrinsic they were to the economy ran it into the ground. Because it turns out when you build an economy who elevate the people already on top, they're just going to keep serving their own self-interest, right? I mean, that's supposed to be one of the strengths of capitalism, is you work in your own self-interest and it springs on ingenuity and innovation. So there needs to be a natural check on that. And that natural check should be labor. It should be government regulation. And without those two, you have people that think they're smarter than they are, and they run it into the ground. So I really think we need to get to that messaging about, lifting everyone up.
And what you're talking about right now is very consistent with the messaging that Speak USA is pursuing. There is value in our democratic history and our democratic institutions. There's reasons we do the things the way that we do them, right? And one person that's never the case, that one person knows what's best.
No, it's the whole point of democracy, because we saw what happens whenever you have one person in charge or a small group in charge. They're going to miss something.
Yeah.
That's truly the
should we say
story.
It together right now? Absolute power corrupts.
Power corrupts, absolutely.
I mean, it's cliche, but there's
true.
There's
and
truth in that.
That's the it's the, I would say silver, but that's the gold lining with Trump, right? Gold. Everyone like him in history who is disconnected from reality. I mean, Hitler, Mao, Stalin, they all had significant problems prop up, or even the end of their reign prop up, because eventually that caught up. It was just so disastrous. They didn't realize. I mean, they built a fortress on quicksand, basically, is what they've done. And it's just waiting for the moment that clicks. And it always does. Authoritarian governments, the one thing that all of them have is an end date. And there is a very good chance that end date will be in your lifetime. They tend to not last as long as a well-functioning democracy. I mean, I wouldn't know if we're always well-functioning. We've existed for 250 years, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
and thank God for the institutions we do have,
the institutions
right?
that protect
that are slowing this down.
Those separations of powers, right? Yeah. And that's that's to me the most important part of democracy, is that, because democracy, I'm a political science major, so you'll hear a little bit of my political science part come out.
Oh, let me sit here like I'm a student.
So one of the things you talk about is, people think that democracy, the most important part is, the will of the people is engaged. That's true, but the most important part of democracy, and some people would argue the part that makes it a democracy, isn't so much the will of the people being directly represented. It's a separation of so many powers in the government that it just becomes too hard for one person to consolidate all of it, right? And so you can have that representation be direct or indirect, insofar as they're going to different parts, right? In the U.S., not only are we a democracy with multiple institutions, we're a federalist system, which means even if all of those institutions fail, there are states who on their own could be their own countries and could still resist.
And if I may add, if the states don't hold the power, then the people do.
Then the people do, yeah.
Right.
So, yes, sir. And so fortunately for the U.S., and this is one of the parts of the system that I defend so much, is people complain about how slow it is, how it feels like nothing happens. And I heard someone tell me once, Congress, their job isn't to pass good laws, it's to stop really bad laws from being passed, And sometimes it feels like that isn't what happens, but I promise you, you can look at one of the ones I think of as repealing, the Affordable Care Act and McCain coming in last second and killing it. That was it right there. And they get big, beautiful bill passed, which sucks. And I'm sure everyone like me it's just the most incompetent piece of legislation I've ever read in my life. But the hope is that in the long run, that thing can be rectified. It's just like how you talked earlier, the longer he's in office, the longer that run's going to end up being. And it's going to hurt for a little bit. That's another thing to say. I want to be honest. It's going to take a lot of work to get us out of this.
Yeah, I hear people. That's an interesting topic, by the way. And it actually gives me an opportunity to just take what we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes and turn it toward what is our primary mission of Speak USA, which is to help people like us. You talked about what recent events, how that's made you feel, how it's caused you to act. I'm sitting here because of the way I feel and how it's caused me to act. I've had enough. I'm not going to watch this and just sit by anymore. If there are people out there who are feeling the same way, what can they do? What would you tell someone who is, somewhere on the continuum to being as unhappy as we are? How do they get engaged? How do they move beyond just being upset about it, complaining about it, and actually do something?
So what I'm about to say right off the bat, I'm gonna look at the camera to say it. It's gonna be almost like your uncle just told you
that's your camera, right?
Get involved, and that sounds weird, but let me explain a little bit more. So there are obviously offices to run for: precinct chair, state house. You could even run for any sort of organizational president on your college campus, run for labor union leadership. Join organizations, no matter where they are, cast a wide net, and make sure you build contacts with different people who are of the same political persuasion, Democrat, hopefully. I'm assuming as a Democrat's only going to be listening, and try to coordinate between those different organizations to affect change, because Republicans do it all the time. School board, oh my gosh, run for school boards. We need more Democrats on every school board across the country, because we're so focused on the national game that we have lost at the local level. And that's the same way with media, right? If you give up the ground game, the source, the capillaries of our system, you are giving up basically where you have your best people come out of. Republicans can have guys rise out of nowhere, right? Because they've taken over so much of our local government, even in cities. Go to your school boards, even in major cities, and you will see just how right-wing those are typically, even in blue communities. So
there's been some good news locally lately.
San Antonio.
I feel like I should say that out loud. Yeah.
San Antonio, I think we're fortunate in a lot of our schools scene in general, because NISD and all the other districts are so big that it almost, even Republicans I know are like very involved in the public schooling, and they tend to be very moderate in terms of their.
There's one local district that there were some issues, but those issues have receded. But if you go, be a good way to put it. Yeah.
But if you go to like major cities, and especially in the South, from Georgia through Florida, blue leaning areas, they'll be filled with like right wing. I think what is it? Mothers for Trump, something like that. They're this giant organization who literally sponsor like Trumpist women to get into school boards in blue areas, red areas, in between. And that kind of organization is the same thing we need. We need to make sure we're fighting them at every front. So, because people always say, what does it mean to fight? What does it mean to be a Democrat, right? And people will give this kind of abstract answer. No, I'm telling you right now, if you want to fight, win local elections, join organizations, gain leadership of organizations, and coalition build. We need to be totally
Yeah,
interfaced.
yeah. You know Martha Spinks.
Yes.
And she was my guest, I think, 2 podcasts ago. And this is what she's doing. She's building community for democracy.
Yes.
Right, building coalitions, building friends. Well, we met each other
Yes.
at an event organized by Martha. I didn't even think about that when I said it. So, all right.
And on top of that, so we're in a state like Texas, and there are people that, they ask, what can Democrats do in the state? Legislatively, there's not a lot we can do. And that's just being honest. You can, disrupt the procedural process.
Well, we stand our ground as long as we possibly
Procedural.
can, right?
The best way to actually apply pressure is find inroads where you can with Republicans that are not part of necessarily the main party, 1. 2, you have to add pressure from right. So this is the legislative process, and then there's like a circle outside of that, which is organizations, labor unions, civic, not unrest, but like protesting and whatnot. You can apply pressure from that circle. And in order for that to work, in order to apply pressure in that way, you have to have community organization. There has to be this understanding between politicians in office and those who are outside of it on how to effectively apply pressure to their Republican colleagues, because we can't do it as effectively through the legislative in this state. And if we want to change that, you have to pressure Republicans into changing some of the rules. Because, with all the gerrymandering stuff going on right now.
That's right. So that's the topic. You just stole my thunder, except we're here for your thunder. So let me change to that, and I'm going to do it using the topic that we just talked about. If redistricting is approved, I'll be ridiculously optimistic and say if. If it's approved, San Antonio, who voted about 55 to 47%, if I remember right, for a mayor clearly aligned with the Democratic. It's a nonpartisan race, but everybody knew. Everybody knew who was on which side. If redistricting goes through, 4 of the 5 congressional representatives who represent San Antonio are going to be from the Republican Party.
Yep.
I'm sorry, this is not right.
No, it's not right. And the way that the real way we fight back on this, and I think I told you the other night, is it has to be California. California is like the cavalry, basically. If Republicans want to play this game, we'll win. If they want to play the gerrymander, Democrats, if we wanted to, could make the House unwinnable for Republicans in perpetuity if we gerrymander the same way. And I think we should.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any reason not to. If California can get a 38-4, I think it was 38-4 majority Democrats. I know they posted their 42 map, but even that's a little ridiculous. Supreme Court probably shoot that down. If you can get 30 plus seats, do it. I don't care.
Well, what choice do we have?
No, exactly.
There's no choice. And by the way, let me just speak up again. Yeah. This is where, part of me is like, how do we get back to a point where the reasonable people in the center, get to, and I should be careful about that, because there are very sincere people who are out on the edges, right? So, there are some who are completely insincere, and I don't care which side they're from. I'm not in favor. I do wish personally that we could be governed from the center, but that is not where we're at today. And we just have no choice.
No, right now we are under siege, and we have to weather the storm of Trump until he's gone. That's what it is. Yeah. His foundation is so hard-read and believes in him so much, he can literally do no wrong. It took the Jeffrey Epstein stuff for people to get mad, and that's not going to go anywhere. His base will forget about that in 2 months. So
stop for a minute and think about what you just said. Yeah. That the fact that he's been hanging out with a pedophile, is not impactful. What is wrong with us? Here's where I look in the camera. What is wrong with us? How can we tolerate this?
And it's not that I think we shouldn't message it. We should keep messaging the Epstein, because so far that's been one of the only things that have stuck. But it's just, I have just no faith in his supporters, like at all, to make any sort of decision.
For what it's worth, I agree with that.
Completely. There's people that I've told this, like people that lean right, and they clutch their pearls because of the way I talk. And at first I felt bad about that, and then I realized I don't care, because I'm never going to win you as a voter. The people that I could win already probably agree with me for the most part. So I'm not going to moderate my positions to someone who thinks that I'm a socialist and, like very well shouldn't be involved in politics. But,
yeah, I mean, that's a life lesson, right? I mean, you don't let your critics.
Yes.
You listen, you try to listen and take seeds of truth and act on them, but you don't let your critics define.
No, especially when they've crossed every red line that I think I put down.
Oh, yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. I shouldn't do that probably. But, someone who has written off Access Hollywood. You remember that? Mm-hmm. Remember Access Hollywood?
I do.
Yeah. I mean, we don't even talk about it anymore. How is this possible? Who has written off the stream of lies, who has written off January 6th? That person has no influence on me.
No. And they shouldn't. I mean, for me, my truly done moment is actually, I'll say that after. Let me finish my first story.
I'm sorry. My fault.
No, it's fine. It's fine. What was I even talking about? Now I'm trying to remember. What was it? It's about, weathering the siege of Trump. So right now we just have to, we don't just have to, we need to get through him. And then it should at the very least get better, just to me, because I've already talked about it. I think his personality is essential to the magic sauce that is the MAGA movement in the Republican Party. But on top of that, Republicans only accept one thing as truth, and that's power. Republicans only respect power. They don't respect democracy. And I say Republicans totally because they've been captured by MAGA. I'm not going to say MAGA Republicans. I'm going to say Republicans because there's no difference between the two. You can't tell me you have problems with his personality and still vote for him and think that I'm going to give you brownie points. You're a Republican. And because they only respect power, we need to play the game, ramp up the heat. Yep. We will make it to where you will not win the House. We can make Congress totally ineffectual.
We're going to play on the field we've been dealt.
Yeah.
The field that's been defined by somebody else.
The field that's been defined that not only is it defined that way, that we could win if we would just play the game. If we would put in our best players, which it feels like we haven't so far. I mean, there's this massive disconnect between the National Democratic Party and the Democratic Party in the states, I think. And that seems so, this gerrymandering thing, I feel, has been the biggest, just really,
I will say this. We have to play that game. I hope when the day comes, and it will come, when a different group of people and probably a different party is in power, I hope we will address some of the fundamental failings of our system that allowed us to get to this point. That we won't look at it and say, well, that's not good for us now, so we're not going to do that. There's a whole slew of laws that I think we should have passed about what is allowed by the executive branch that we didn't pass. And I don't understand why we haven't done.
Well,
that.
it's difficult to do that even with laws, and I don't know when we'll be able to do that again and actually have a weaponized legislative, but because the Supreme Court is just going to interpret it in just such wild ways for the foreseeable few decades, right? I guess the only thing I can hope for is previously Democrats already tried to pass independent commissions for federal elections across the entire United States. Republicans shot it down. They have no moral authority. And I do have faith, because I'm willing to say, if we take power and we're able to pass that bill, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with blue states having more Republican representation. That's a positive to me. I want the democratic process to work. But we're not going to do that while at the same time literally watching our Democratic constituents be robbed of their seats.
That's right.
Right. And I think I saw it was Hochul in New York. Someone asked, are you willing to?
By the way, I was kind of talking about the national level.
Yes.
At the state level, you'd have to have almost a compact between the states.
It would have to be an interstate compact. I was talking about federal truth from Congress in terms of federal elections, but the states still need to be in coordination to actually, until that happens, to coordinate an effective response. But I was watching Hochul give I believe that's what I said, the New York governor. Hochul? I think is that how you say her name?
Yeah.
She was given a question. I can't remember the reporter, and they were like, are you just gonna gerrymander all of these seats and do it? And she's like, yes. That was her only response. And then she went on and said yes, pause. And I guess everyone was waiting for more. And she said, I'm just tired of playing this game with my hand tied behind my back. And I'm like, yeah. And those are the answers I love. I love just saying yeah, and then not explaining.
Right.
Like, absolutely. You really? That's how I talk. If I talk with conservatives, I talk to them like that. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. They're like, because you have people that say the audacity, but that's not very democratic of you. I'm like, no, it's not. But it's how you win. So, and that's the game I'm playing with you right now. I'm not in this to, right now, I'm not in this to do the most democratic thing possible. I'm in to win, right? And that's unfortunate that we're at that point.
May I suggest a slightly different way of saying that we are in it to win so that we can get back to doing things in a democratic way and preserve it.
And also with gerrymandering, it's not breaking any of the rules. Supreme Court literally said you can gerrymander along political lines. It's allowed. It's literally allowed. And I understand my words may be kind of sharp and it may throw people off, but I feel as though I'm saying the truth, and I'm saying it the way that a lot of people just don't because they're so afraid to.
Well, I would hope people appreciate that.
I hope so too.
To me, it's just a question of then what are you going to do with the power when you gain it? Are you going to be committed to trying to bring us back more to an equitable way? I brought this up at our last podcast 20 years ago. 20 years ago now. Maybe more toward the beginning of his term. No, actually, it would be more like 30 years ago when George W. Bush was governor of the state of Texas. There was, according to word on the street, a collaborative spirit in the Texas legislature. There were regularly Democrats who were appointed as committee chairs. And I think that went both ways. I had, Governor Richards, Ann Richards was the last Democratic governor, and I think there's a history of that. And then it turned. And when it turned, I hope we can get back to that, but, maybe we're going around the block too many times here. We can't do it.
Well, I've heard, and like I said, because my commitment at the end is towards preserving American democracy. It just so happens at this very moment in time, in order for us to win, we're going to have to push the edges of that to regain power so we can restructure rules for that democracy to last longer in the future. And I can already see, literally, I can think of the conservative talking points that they'll say from that statement right now. They'll say, oh, look at that. He doesn't care about democracy. He's willing to play the game like this. He's willing to manufacture victories. And they talk as though they don't do the exact same thing. And people say, oh, you're really willing to stoop down to that level. I mean, it's not stooping down to a level. This is politics. If it's too dirty for you, if you don't like it, if it doesn't make you feel good, I'm sorry, but that this is not the world that you probably want to be in.
We're playing the game. We're playing on the field we've been dealt.
You're playing on the field we've been dealt, and we have to win. It's not left or right. It's win or lose. Democracy, authoritarianism. That's it. Those are two. We're in a very two-choice world right now. That's why you have everyone voting down ticket or not voting at all, right? And that's one of the biggest ways to tell whenever the political climates become so tense.
That would be a heck of a place to wrap up. Before I do that, you got anything else you want to say before we?
Oh, yeah.
Bring this in for a landing?
Yes, sir. If anyone wants to follow me, I do not have a website yet. Still have to do more fundraising. But you can find me on Instagram at @ElectChaseTaylor. You can find me on TikTok by the same name and on Twitter as at @ElectChaseTaylor 2026.
So I want to ask everybody who's watching, what did you learn about democracy today? Surely you learned something. Chase, that was really spectacular.
I think it's first podcast.
This is, what's the word I'm looking, the word I'm looking for is eluding me, but that is a lot of knowledge and understanding, depth of understanding beyond your years. This is a fascinating conversation. Thank you. So.
I hope I wasn't too long-winded talking to you.
No, there's long-winded and then there's depth, and I'm going to tell you that was not long-winded. That's what I'm saying, everybody. So anyway, so I hope by watching this Speak USA podcast, you learned something about your democracy today. I have to believe that you did. Our website is speakusa.org, speakusa.org, where if you are inspired to act in light of what's going on in our country right now, we are a place you can learn, connect, find places to give and ways to support and resist the changes that are happening in our democracy and find a better way. So we hope you'll join us in that effort. Check out our website, speakusa.org. Sign up for our newsletter at the bottom of our homepage. And we hope to see you next time. Until then, speak for the USA.